Welcome to Check In to Check Out, the e-commerce growth podcast for mobile first. My name is Justin Ehrenstein and my co-host is Connor Burke.
Welcome to Check In to Check Out. On today's episode, we have Kasey, the Director of E-commerce at Liberty Safe. Kasey, how long have you been there? What do you own? What do you control? What's your day look like?
So I'm actually sort of still new to Liberty. I've been there since August. I was really hired to come in and help grow their e-com and shift kind of like their overall online presence. Was really excited to take the job because there's a ton of opportunity to come in and build a program for them. And I really, really love that side of e-com too, is like, how do you take something that has so much opportunity and scale it? Right now, I'm kind of still in the trenches in a sense. I mean, I've been there for 5 months, but there was a lot of stuff to untwine, and all that stuff. Unfortunately, there was no overlap with the previous leader of ecom. So I had to kind of connect with people internally and be like, what do you know? What do you know? The upside is they're on Shopify Plus and I'm a certified Shopify partner as well. So I was like, okay, at least I got that. But yeah, I'm responsible for all of our revenue growth. I also am responsible for traffic growth. So I kind of manage that team to help drive all of the, whether it's earned or owned traffic for us to the website.
Awesome. So you are in every single bucket.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Awesome. And how do you know like where to spend your time? There's so much.
Great question. I try to prioritize on the things that, and this is really kind of just like my overall life statement, but things I can control, right? Like if I'm looking at data and I'm like, I don't get hung up on the things that I know that I can't fix right away. Like what are some of those short-term wins that I can address, right? So then I'm like, okay, let's prioritize this because we know we're going to see some sort of ROI, whether it's financial or right in terms of process. But a lot of times, as we are in leadership roles, you end up kind of doing a lot of things that don't really fall into your role. Sometimes it's like chasing down content or chasing down assets or chasing down XYZ or adjusting budgets and stuff. So right, there's this whole like side of the role that you're just like you're a secretary half the time. So I really have to focus on like, okay, what are the most important things that I can do right now to move the needle? And that's what I do. And those are things that I can control. I don't try to get hung up on things that I'm like, okay, this is going to take a dev team. This is going to take this. That's a future state. We're going to get there. We know that's like a nice to have, but it's not an immediate fix to an issue we have now.
Do you mind us asking how big is your team?
Yeah. So in terms of who reports to me, I have a paid ad specialist. So she manages all of our Meta, Google, and Bing. And then I have a social media and ipso facto like life cycle marketing gal that reports to me as well. So she manages kind of like our organic social, but then I also have her doing all of our email and kind of like all of our drip campaigns and then our just regular category sends. So right now, and then I also have a videographer, photographer that rolls up under me. So 3 as of now, but I am the single e-com backend, manage all that as well.
Makes a lot of sense. One of the questions I'm always curious about is when do leaders in your position delegate things out to other people instead of taking the ownership themselves? And then when do they maybe hire partners for certain roles?
Yeah, I kind of really like to look at that as like how high touch the role is, right? Like, and by that, I mean like with the brand, like how often do I need to be like connecting with this person? So in like past roles, I would like look at things and be like, okay, what makes sense here from, supporting our paid efforts in terms of digital marketing? And it was like, well, that isn't necessarily a conversation I need to be having every day. I just need somebody to like manage budgets and make sure that we're not like blowing out ROAS. So to me, I'm like, do you hire a partner to do that? Instead, they're experts. Like they have all the contacts. So if something goes wrong with your Google account, like they can make that happen because they're partners, right? But then I look at things like development, right? And when you have like your site breaks in the middle of Cyber Monday or Black Friday, like having someone in-house to help manage that is way easier than a team that's been outsourced, or you have a team that you have to like submit a help ticket through, and then you got to wait for them to do that, and there's like no emergency, right? So for me, it's really like that high, how like what's that touch? Like is it high or is it like that mid to low touch kind of role.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm always interested about with a lot of our guests is, it's because it's you get a different answer every time. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think the one you're describing is a great answer.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes to then though be like, okay, wait, was this the right choice? But you
Hmm.
kind of navigate through. And I think that's the great thing about like partners and agencies. None of them are ever hurt, right? If you're like, hey, we're gonna actually bring this in-house, they're like, yeah, it happens to us all the time. Like
Yeah,
we get that, you know?
you could take the emotion out of the equation a little more.
Exactly.
Love that. Yeah,
Exactly.
that is very true. Yeah, it's funny.
And so do you guys have do you all have in-house developers?
No, we don't. So I this is point of contention recently. So no,
Mhm.
I have a team right now. They're based in Boston though, so it's not too bad. But it is really hard to like, we had some issues and like we are so I'll just use this as an example because it kind of covers both. But like right when we launched our free Black Friday, Google flagged our site as compromised. For awesome. Right. So they basically said, nope, we're not going to display any of your, we're going to just pause all your campaigns. So then it was like, and Google's so nice at telling you why you've been compromised. They just say there's something on your site. So it was just like, okay, how do I like put up like, so I had to post like an urgent ticket in our Basecamp board and like wait for them to respond. Meanwhile, ELT's like, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, we're about to lose probably 40 grand because we don't have someone that I can like help dig into that, right? And I think that's kind of the other side of prioritization and what you're good at, right? So for me, like I know enough code stuff to be dangerous, but that's not where I thrive. So for me to start to dig in and look at like everything that could be compromising or if somebody put something, some bad code on, that's not me. So I have to lean into someone that is the expert there. And so those are situations where I sometimes wish I did have someone in house, but then it's like you're building a whole team, right? Because then you need that front end and you need that back end where that agency, you're just paying a flat fee. So, but again, there's times when you really do wish they were in house.
What was the problem?
So basically, we had some mind tags in our head, I think was the problem. Something happened where like we had something that maybe had aged out. And it wasn't like, yeah. Again, I know enough to be dangerous, and now I'm like, sometimes once things get fixed, no, my brain only has so much capacity. I'm like,
Oh,
great, done. We're moving on.
I don't have to worry about that anymore.
I don't have to worry about that anymore.
I love it. Yeah, I think the balance of when to bring in in-house team, especially development team, it's
Hmm.
a tough question. There's no right
Yeah.
answer. So it sounds like you've had a really successful career, director of e-commerce, successful company, and kudos to you. But I find more interesting people's failures. So what failures have you had in your career that you've been able to learn from?
Yeah. So actually, Connor, you brought up something earlier about emotion, right? And I think that's like a big thing for me was I had a lot of things along the way where I took to personally in a sense that if like, a lot of my roles I've been singular in a sense where I didn't have like an e-com team to back me up, right? Like I had some dev team folks but I didn't like have like a merchandiser or I didn't have, a true lifecycle marketing person in one role. So I was kind of doing it all. So I took all that weight on as an individual and then would beat the crap out of myself because I got too emotionally attached to when I messed up. And so I had to really start to learn to remove the emotion from things and conversations. And instead of being like, kind of like, hey, this failed because you didn't give me the support I needed, I would like remove that and be like, how do we solve this instead? So some of the failures have been just through my career, have been just like, honestly, like moving too quickly, right? Not testing enough and going off assumption instead of data because of like bandwidth in some instances. But it's like when you send out that email with the typo, right? It goes out to your audience and you're like, oh, it hits you in the pit of the stomach and you're like, why did this happen? Like, and you kind of like me, I would like spiral and just again, coming back to remove the emotion and control what you can control. So a lot of the failures were really that kind of, not thinking about what I could control. And then also I think you just as you grow, you communicate better. And so just not communicating enough up front or being too vague and like that causes breaks in your process and that causes breaks in how things get done. And in the end, that all fell back to me, like whether I was doing like a promo and I didn't give the right information up front. And I think the biggest thing from your failures is making sure that you're actually learning from them. And I know people say that a lot, but I think the ones that, like the email one, that one still is in my brain and it's been 12 years, right? But that's something that I still think about. And I think about points of communication where I failed in the past and been like, yeah, that was on me. And so how can I better communicate? And then the other side of failure is not understanding people, right? As you go through your role. And I think we're not all psychologists. We can't read everybody's minds, but I think it's very important in order to be successful is to really understand how to work with people. It's not a blanket approach, right? You have different emotions, you have different types of personalities. And really, if you're not thinking about that and you're communicating at the same style across everyone because that's your style, that's a failure for yourself too. And I had to learn that the hard way with losing some clients.
That's a great answer. I feel like that's one of the hard things about experimentation. Kind of touched on a few of the things that you said, but one is not getting too attached to things and removing your emotion. I know when I got into experimentation, it was like you'd come up with these great ideas and you'd build out these great designs, and then they would lose, and you'd have to kind of learn to like, okay, I can't get too attached to this. I have to just figure out what didn't work, and we're going to iterate and we're going to move, really quickly. So when you're talking about this kind of it sounds to me like that's kind of the culture that you're creating at Liberty Safe. Do you feel like that's been difficult in the past, like creating a culture that maybe kind of removes emotion but still promotes empathy? And then I think at the same time, it sounds like you're doing a lot of experimentation. I mean, I think that all kind of goes hand in hand.
At Liberty, it's been welcomed
Yeah.
because the person who was in the role that I replaced, I mean, I don't want to speak ill of the person, I don't know them.
Mhm.
But the conversations I've had internally, rough around the edges, zero room for like having conversations about anything. It was like my way, highway, right?
Yeah.
So there's a book I read a while back called Radical Candor by Kim Scott.
Hmm.
And it's really exactly that. It's how to be like transparent and honest and remove the emotion, but still be empathetic, because that is the other side of me. I'm a huge empath. Like I feel everything. Like, we just had an incident here locally with a gentleman that died in an avalanche, and our friend was the paramedic that helped. He like gave CPR. He was off duty. He was out snowmobiling in the backcountry. He's the one that gave the CPR and ultimately helped evacuate the gentleman, right? I felt I felt every ounce of that for him, right? But in, your professional life, you really kind of have to be like, what's the best for where I am right now at Liberty? And it's really kind of then you figure out how you balance that, being transparent and being honest and telling people like, hey, this isn't working, but without like breaking them down. So that's kind of where you have to balance that. And I use that even for like my, and my employees. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to be harsh about it, but if you're not making the grade, we're going to have a conversation about it instead of like beating around the bush, because you can't do that. And then I worked with a gal a while back and she was so passionate, just so passionate. And I loved that about her. But she would get so like in a meeting, like fired up and just like, this is how we got to do it. This is the right way. Wouldn't kind of listen to the conversation as a whole to like negotiate. And then we'd get off a call and someone was harsh to her in the meeting, like standing their ground and being, transparent. She'd call me like in tears. And I was like, you got to start to remove the emotion. It's
Yeah.
not that big of a thing. Like, let's think about that. And she wrote it down on a sticky note and put it on her like monitor. So she would remember like when she was in meeting, just like, okay, like recenter, remove the emotion, because once you remove that, it becomes more about, tacticality and data, and especially in our roles as ecom. So
Yeah. And it's so hard not to get that wrapped up. It becomes dogmatic for a lot of people what they're doing every day. And they, it's hard not to take it personally. It's a real skill. It's a real
yeah,
skill.
exactly.
So I bet you, going back to the email with the typo, if I had to guess, that email outperformed what it should have.
I don't remember, but you know what the best part was? You want to know what the typo was? The TEH instead of THE. And of course, like nobody reads it that way. They read it as the, because our
It's
brains are trained to do that, right?
Totally.
But as it was like a smaller brand. We were really trying to grow. Like our CEO was like, it was his baby. And like, I felt terrible, and nobody caught it because I would send it out to like everybody, be like, please get some other eyes on this. Nobody caught it.
I did an email marketing manager for a long time, and anytime she had a typo in an email, it was a very well performing email.
Yeah.
And it has everyone's eyes on it. Everyone sees the emails that go out. So they're like, oh, they'll look at him. Then they're looking for
Looks
the
great.
problem. But like the ad team, they could have 25 ads and half of them are bad and no one would ever know because no one sees half the ads.
Right. It's the email.
Yeah, like, because not under the same microscope. So like email and the site, like if there's any problem with the site, like people are up in arms.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's like, you
Yep.
don't even look at our ads.
Yeah. Do you know what's going on over here?
Yeah. So that's awesome. So switching gears a little, do you have any e-commerce hot takes?
Yeah. Personalization. So this is really weird for me. So like, right, we're shifting into this world of AI where it's saying, okay, like let's use like models and then let's use data to kind of show up, like present to the customer what we think they need to see, right?
Mhm.
So I think you're kind of shifting from like this old model of personalization where we were using first party data internally on a website to be like, okay, Kasey, you've been to our website X amount of times and this is what you looked at. Here's some more lamps. Here's some more couches or whatever, right? To now a little bit more leaning into customers like you and all this stuff. So I feel like the old way was like super creepy and I kind of was never a fan of it. And like I also feel like it's a term really loved by ELT, by executive leadership teams. They
Yeah.
love that word because it's thrown around so much and they're like, well, how are we personalizing? And it's like, well, we don't have the right data to do it right now, or we don't have the right tools. And, maybe it doesn't work for our audience. Right. So having those conversations is tough because it gets thrown around so much. So for me, I kind of tend to shy away from it until you really know it's gonna work. And how do you know that? Well, you have to test it, right? But I find it creepy. It weirds me out. Like, great example. I don't have kids of my own, but I have nieces and nephews, and then I have friends that have babies and whatever. And I'll go like shop for something, and I'm like buying a like baby shower gift, and then all of the sudden, it's assumed that I need all this like kid, and I'm like, no, that's you're wrong, right? So there's a lot of assumption that's happening, and I'd be super curious, like for that example, at what their conversion looks like for exactly that. There's a lot of people that shop solely for like not themselves, but as gifts and stuff like that, So I think
100% agree. And 100%. So the other thing that happens is, let's say you personalize the experience. What percentage of like the total audience or the total revenue are you actually personalizing? Like what percentage do you actually have that first party data, or like what percentage are you actually impacting? So you like make all these efforts, you put all this development time in, like what percentage of the audience is being impacted by it? So I really struggle with that as well.
yes,
And so, yeah, it isn't good. What I am excited about in personalization, like the area that I think we're going to need to be keen on is as the new Facebook algorithm changes for advertising.
yes,
And as it does its targeting on its own based on what a creative is performing, how do you actually match that creative that's performing well to the site intelligently,
yeah,
to
yeah.
that
It's gonna
landing
be
page?
yeah,
Because you, as the site owner, as the person managing the site, the creative is changing every week. But how do we correctly map what people are responding to as just the amount of creative increases?
yeah. It's gonna be interesting for sure as we start to navigate. I mean, like right now, I don't even like have an answer for that, right? Because I think it's really gonna mess with attribution as we kind of start to navigate through all that, right? So
Totally, totally. Do you pay attention to the attribution? Is that like,
not right now. I have some broken tracking, so no. No, I mean it depends, right? Too like again, like we're gonna talk about buzzwords and stuff. Like those are other ones that people just get like super hung up on and like, oh, but what's the attribution? And I'm like, well, do you want to look at first touch or do you want to look at last touch or what do you want to look at? So you kind of as leaders in like ecom, we have a lot of interesting conversations where I feel like you're battling buzzwords like you're again back to your hot take question, like what there's so many of like, but what are we doing this? And personalization again, like I think too there's brands that like they get that pressure, right? Like their director or whomever's running their ecom, they get that pressure and so they're like fine. And then I get an email that's like, dear, and it's like an order number because that's all the information they have for me or something, right? Like that's supposed to be, guys.
That's funny. We have a couple clients that have had that discussion with us where they're getting pressure from whoever's above them to say like, oh, we need more personalization on there. They just need to hear AI in the meetings, and then they feel like satisfied that they're doing
Yeah.
something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It'll completely derail, I think, something that's actually doing well,
Yeah.
just to meet these buzzwords.
Yeah.
Hey, I know we talk a lot about leadership on this show, but if you want to keep your job in 2026, you're going to have to grow revenue. And one of the best ways to do that is to grow revenue per visitor. That's what we do at Mobile First. We have guaranteed results to grow RPV through experimentation. Interested? Check us out at mobilefirst.com.
Is there a part of the job that you dread?
Yeah. Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Like it's the worst. Like sure, high dollar, great time for the company, but like it's tough. You're balancing a lot of like, what the F's going on? Like, why isn't this performing? X, Y, Z, like, and then you're like, do you guys know where we are in the economy right now? Or like customer sentiment is this, we've been on sale for 60% of the year already. And then we offered like this, I mean, there's just so many variables and it's just like, it's hectic. And right, you have to decide what to prioritize during that time. So then you come out of it and it's like the one saving grace of Black Friday, Cyber Monday is like everybody takes the last 2 weeks of the year off. So you're like,
Yeah.
all right, we made it. Now I can like dig out of my inbox or whatever. But I also think it's like, for me, so I come from the ski and snowboard industry and I've been in e-com lane since 2006-ish. So like really early on in a sense, right? Especially in that industry, right? You weren't seeing a lot of manufacturers do stuff. And at the time, I did work at a local mom and pop ski and snowboard shop in Lake Tahoe. They had with four locations, one of which was an outlet. We had a warehouse, and I was marketing / e-com, and it was just like really early on. And manufacturers at that point were like, "Oh, well, we're going to let the retailers kind of dip their toes in first." And then they quickly realized they were losing out. And so then the manufacturers were like, "Okay, we want to party," but they had all these MAP policies in place that didn't allow for like Black Friday. So then I was getting pressure again from like, I worked for K2 Sports, which they own K2 skis, snowboards. Like there's 10 brands at the time when I worked there. So I was managing 10 brands for e-com. And then some of them were like, oh yeah, we're going to participate in a Black Friday. And other brands were like, no, but we had a parent company. It was like, why aren't you? Like, what's the deal? And we're like, well, that's because that's how we built the industry. And so I went from kind of never dabbling in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, to a brand that was kind of borderline outdoor ski snowboard, to using that time to like give back, to Orvis, which is full on retail. Like we protected some of our categories to like blow the doors off. And I was like, what is happening? I just think it's like unnecessary stress for your team often too. Like, and it's just like, oh, now we're going to flip out the site 17 times so customer thinks it's new, because yes, we know that works, but it's also just like madness and to use a term from the car industry, madness under the canvas, like, you have time sale.
Yeah. It's funny. I grew up working in retail, and I basically was boots on the ground for Black Friday.
Yeah.
Growing up. And then I remember I got out of that for a little while and was like, oh, thank God I never have to do that again. And then I ended up in tech, and now I'm just on the other side of it.
Yeah, you're on the other side. Yeah.
My big problem with it is it's like all operational, no strategic. Like it's just like all just like pushing buttons, but there's nothing strategic about it. It's like push all the buttons.
Push all the buttons. And if that button doesn't work, push it again.
I love it. Is there anything that you wish the executive team knew about your job that...
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate right now. My ELT is like great. They are fully like, yeah, you're the expert. Like it's really nice to be in a position like that. Like the past has not been that way. So right now it's awesome. They're like, yeah, whatever you say. And I'm like, it's like sugarcoating anything. That's not how I am. I do consider myself an expert in the area in e-com. Been in it forever, but obviously continuing to learn. But in my past, it's a lot of like going back to those buzzwords and how do you combat that? I think SEO is a great one, right? There's always that like, well, it's not returning. And it's like, because it doesn't work that way. It's not an instant, like, it's not like you put out an ad on Facebook for 2 weeks and you see that, like, it doesn't work that way. And so having to have those conversations. But, I've worked for some folks in the past that just, I'm not going to say they're micromanagers, but they handcuffed, right? And even though you were hired as the expert, you were never really allowed to kind of use your expertise, because even though you brought it to the table, it was still like, oh, no, I don't think that works for our audience. And it's like, well, I have the data about our audience. So can we try So there was a lot of like stuffing you down, and it's terrible for your self-esteem, but also just thinking about like, wait, am I in like the wrong industry? Do I not want to be in ecom if I can't get to that place where I'm as a trusted leader? And so if I go to like my role at Orvis, I had a phenomenal manager. Like I cannot speak highly enough of her. She basically like was like, you have PTSD from past roles. I'm like, yeah, I totally do. And she's like, but she's like, use your voice. And so like I had to kind of learn to like, no, I do know what I'm talking about. I do have this. I do get it. Because some of my former, leaders weren't that way. They were just like, yeah, yeah, sure, Kasey, or whatever. I mean, I had one instance that was wild where like if I said something, like we'd be in a group meeting, like a team meeting, and the CEO would like brush me off, but then my male counterpart, I shit you not, would see that happen and then he'd say it and it was a great idea. And him and I had conversations about it. Like, and I'm like,
Yeah.
so I think that's really like, let people that you hire let them be experts, let them prove themselves. You're going to quickly learn if they are, they aren't. And then the other side of it is like, kill the buzzwords, man. Ask first. And before you sink your talons in and are like, oh, we got to do this. Like, let's have some conversations about it. So they're my kind of two
It makes a lot
things,
of
not
sense.
just one.
That's interesting you say that about the experts. I think that's one of the things that we find when we hire new people here, especially new growth strategists. We find that we're constantly having to tell them like, you don't need to explain yourself. You're the expert. You go in with it. You demonstrate that you know what you're talking about, and if they need the data, you have it available to share. But you need to kind of it's always like this kind of process of building up that confidence with junior roles that like just remember
Yeah.
that we're hiring you because you have the expertise, you have the skills, we trust you, get out there and learn that. And it's interesting just to watch people go through that period of like, I think we should do this because I saw this and I saw that and I saw this, to go in like 6 months from then, and then they're just saying this is what you need to do and trust me. And it's a phenomenal journey to see people go through. And I think it's great
Yeah.
advice that you're saying.
Yeah.
So one thing in talking to you, you told us that you're Baymard certified. So what have you learned and what do you apply as an ecom director? How do you synthesize all that information? Baymard has tons of information. I mean, we subscribe to it and it's just incredible. So how do you synthesize all that information to really use it to increase revenue?
Right. So when I was tapped for this role, I came through recruiter. I went to the website and I was like, holy shit. Like my eyes were like, look at this meaty thing I could sink my teeth into here.
Mhm.
And I did an entire site audit. And what I did is I said, okay, what are the most glaring UX issues that we have here? Before I even like got into like functionality, like it was really like kind of what are the, again, control what you control and what can I impact today? So there were things that I was like, oh yeah, like we could flip a switch on this tomorrow and I bet your conversion rate changes, right? So for me, it's really kind of looking at that top level and being like, okay, the best practice coming out of Baymard is saying this. How can we apply this? And what's the lift to get there? Right. Because I always have to keep that balance too, in terms of like, who am I paying? Is it my time or I'm going to have to go to the dev team to help them do it? So and then I was like, well, they're on Shopify. Great. So then I presented it to the CEO and the chief revenue officer. I'm like, here's like my top level things I would change. Got in and I was like, wait a sec. We're barely Shopify 2.0. We don't even use collection pages properly. Like it's not, I couldn't. I was really struggling to make all these changes that I sold them on, but they quickly understood once I got into the back end of everything. They were like, oh, okay, gotcha. And I'm like, so we just really can't. So now it's kind of like, well, how about we just do a redesign and we'll just apply what we know the best practices are and start fresh instead of trying to tweak this website to fit the mold. We're just going to start over. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you can only Frankenstein for so long before all of the sudden you're in the middle of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and your site breaks and you can't get a hold of your dev. Right?
So are you in the middle of a redesign right now?
Yes. Because that's what it came down to. I'm like, we're not even to the level we need to be. We're paying for Shopify Plus and we can't even benefit in a sense from all the things that they're rolling out and all this stuff. Yeah, we are going through sort of a redesign process internally right now, like defining what that needs to look like. And
So you're
I
just
mean,
at the beginning stages.
yeah, it's just super start. Well, yeah, it's been kind of going on. We had some internal changes in Q4 that we had to, navigate through. But yeah, and it's just kind of like, how do you, sometimes that's just what you have to do. You just have to move into a new instance and start fresh and then set it up properly and then maintain it, right? Because that's the other thing is sometimes you get people in that are like, oh, just do it this way. And you're like, well, that's not the right way to do it. So that's what excites me about Baymard is it's a really great way to say, no, this is the right way. They have the data that backs this. And I think sometimes for some people, some of their ELT get hung up on how they think something should be. In reality, you have to push back with the data. And that can be, those are tough conversations to often have.
So taking these best practices in Baymard, are you just implementing them or are you running experiments to see that it
Both.
actually works?
Yeah, no. Well, some I think you should. Like, I think there's some that you're just like, yeah, dude, like that's how it should be. There's others that I even like instinct, like gut reaction is like that's not how I shop, And I get it. I'm an anomaly. I spend a lot of time online, like in websites, sniffing around, and like I think that's the other thing too. You'll get like an ELT, will send you really love this website. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty, but like I can't even figure out how to like get to the pants.
Totally.
I just need pants.
That's funny. Yeah, I feel like it's always battling the executive decision whenever they see something they love and they kind of chase that, I
Yeah,
can't think of the analogy here, but yeah, they're like,
yeah.
"Oh, I saw this on the Target website." And it's like, that has nothing to do with, yeah, we sell digital products. It's, yeah,
Yeah. And that's the other side of Liberty is that, we sell a really large, heavy item online, right?
very
So
specific.
how do you inexpensive and like so how do you like get everything the customer needs to know up front without like A, overwhelming them and B, being like super like, hey, yeah, we get that you're spending a lot of money and like, these things are made to order in the US. Like it's gonna take a minute. It's like we don't just go pick them off the shelf.
Do you
The
feel like
Amazon warehouse.
when you were starting at the company and maybe the conversation of experimentation came up, was it something they were already doing or was it something that you had to kind of institute yourself?
Like A/B testing? Sorry, just to clarify, like stuff
Yes,
like
yes,
that?
like A/B
Yeah,
testing.
yeah, yeah. So the previous director of ecom, I was told did some A/B testing. I'm like, how? We don't have a tool. So
Yeah.
then I was like super confused. And then our CEO said the same thing to me. He's like, wait, what? Well, then he lied to me. I'm like, yeah, well, there's nothing that I can see. So they're no, they're fully on board. Like I actually get asked a lot by the CEO. Like a lot of times he will say to me, hey, is this something we can test? Or will like VP of marketing will push back if he requests something and she'll say, hey, I think we should test this. And I'm like, yes, please. Instead of just like, right. Because if you're not testing, you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping
Yeah, you're
something
shooting from the
sticks,
hip.
right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What tool are you using?
Nothing right now. I'm
Nothing.
just kind of well, what I do is I just manually running stuff. I'll put stuff up for like,
Uh-huh.
I'll say, okay, this is our average traffic, like to this page. I know it's a top, product for us. Let me run it for a couple weeks and see what happens. And then I'll be like, okay, that was insignificant. Like, but until we have like, and I heard that now Shopify with their winter 26 rollout, they have a new tool that they're implementing that's going to allow you to just natively test and schedule stuff. So I was like, whoo,
That's really exciting.
yeah.
Awesome. So kind of wrapping up, is there anything that you're reading or listening to that really excites you that you're looking forward to in 2026?
So like Baymard's my kind of go-to. Like I love their newsletter, but I think a few other things are like I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, like not necessarily looking for a job, obviously, but like like that's how we connected, Justin. And so
Mhm.
like I always appreciate like the insights, and I like to read trends. Like what are people saying are trending, and does it follow the fashion mantra of like things just go around, right? Like
Mhm.
were we doing something 10 years ago that now is a trend again, but because we have better tools, so I like to lean into that. And so I find a lot of great stuff just like on LinkedIn. But I think one book that I like to read time and time again, that it's not even industry related, but I think it's just a great book on understanding and growing within a team and just is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. Like it's such a great book. If you peel back the like cocaine and you peel back the Anthony Bourdain a little bit and you get to like, man, we're all just in a kitchen. Just don't cut your fingers off, right? But you're dealing with like owners and leadership and like all this stuff, and he just like balanced it in such an elegant way with his words. It's just like such a great read. I read it like at least, twice a year because I'm a nerd. But
Love it.
I just think it speaks. Sometimes, like, yeah, you jump into a book that's like industry related or whatever. But I think if you kind of step back into some of those other tried and true things that you like to read, you kind of can start to piece things together. And then one other thing is not necessarily like a huge conference person or, whatever, but the e-tail conference is super fun.
hmm
I'm not a big network person that way, but every time I go to that, I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. So I like to just be kind of like a fly on the wall a little bit to some of those, and then also be like, really, you think that's a good? Okay, interesting.
Do you find the conferences that what people are talking about is relevant or recent? My big concern with all the speakers at conferences is always something 2 years ago.
Yes, because that was when they had their win, right? That's when they saw their spike. So
Hmm.
then now they're an expert, and so like let's bring them on as a panel, And I'm always like, no, I do find that, but that's why I kind of like to go too. I'm like, so going back to trends, was it something we were doing 10 years ago, and now we have better tools to maybe make it better? But the other thing with conferences kills me is the amount of conversations about personalization, and this is where it happens. It comes from those, and everybody brings it back. And everybody's
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, we're going to do that. And I'm like, but maybe like, can we talk about this first? So I do find them intriguing and I do like to attend them. I always do learn something for good or bad, right? I always learn something. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kasey. This was a wonderful conversation with a ton of insights, and we
yeah,
really appreciate it.
thank you for having me. It was super fun. And one final note, I will say, I'm super glad that we're all hair triplets today with our long hair stuff. You guys are
Don't
fitting
get
with
that
my
joke
crew.
across.